I wanted to share with you a story, and I kind of label it from innocence to addiction to redemption. And basically, it's my life story. The Word says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I'm going to do a brief testimony. There's a lot I could cover in it. I will point out some of the things, and I will do later videos on it. I was a drug addict up until the age of 40 years old. I want to say that right off the start, maybe to just tell you there is hope. I'm going to go all the way back to the childhood when I wasn't even supposed to live at birth. My mother was supposed to die. I was supposed to die. I was a premature baby. She was over 40 years old. But the Lord, or the Word says that the Lord knew me even from the womb. And He had plans for me. I came out fine. She came out fine. And my father, at the age of 4 years old, he was a mason. He laid brick. And I sat in the driveway one day waiting for him to come home for 3 days. Every evening, just waiting. And sometimes, Dad drank a lot and he didn't come home for a day or two. But on that third day, I realized that my dad would never come home again. And at that moment, as a little 4-year-old boy, you feel all these feelings of rejection, or how could Daddy not love me, or why was Mama so mean to him he left. And there was a whole lot of issues going on. And what I realized years later was I believed something that day that was a lie. And it become part of my belief system, my character, and my personality. And this later would help define who I was in life for the first 42 years of my life. So after that point, and he had left, of course, Mom raised me on her own. I was pretty much ashamed of my mom. She was a lot older than mothers, and so with kids, they were my age. So when she would come to school and everybody's mother was real young, I would tell them she was my grandmother. And I loved her very much, but yet I blamed her for my father leaving. And so as the years went on and I got into teenage years, I guess probably around the age of 14 or so, I began to experiment with drinking, with pot, marijuana, those type of things, and I found I liked them. And more I began to indulge into the world of alcohol and drugs. And at the same time, I was getting to be at that age where teenage boys are I liked girls a whole lot. And I became addictive also to relationships, or to different relationships, to having sex day and night with different women. And this became a part of who I was. All of this began to develop, and I've become a person I didn't want to be. I remember saying in the 7th grade, I never want to be like my father. And I was becoming exactly who my father was. So, through this process, I needed acceptance. I needed to be accepted. I was the life of the party. I could party with the kids at the private schools with the polos. I could party with the bikers by putting on my black t-shirt and going to their club meetings. Back then we called ourselves the hoods, just the ones that hung out, smoked weed. I partied with them. I could fit in with any group, the rednecks. I put my goat roping hat on and go to the rodeo, drink Budweiser. I just had the need to be accepted because of the rejection I felt when I was younger. And that's a whole nother series also to really indulge into later, just with like the love-hate relationship with mother, or being brought up fatherless, and what it means to have a father and instead of just a dad, or what it means to to at least have a dad and know who they are, where they are, that they care about you, that they love you. So these are all some pretty deep issues in my life. And at the age of 18, I stuck a needle in my arm for the first time. At the age of 19, I was in my first rehab center. This was start a process from the age of 19 to the age of 42 to over 18 rehab centers, some faith-based, some secular, some high dollar, some free. I only went to jail once. My mother sent me, and I was a juvenile, or just turned 18, so actually it was a misdemeanor. She was trying to teach me a lesson. And so I was blessed that I never got caught, because there are many people sitting there today for the same things I was doing, and they're looking at life. I've got strung out on every drug there was, but mainly cocaine was my drug of choice. And for 30 years, I fought that drug. It took over my life. It ruined my life. It cost me my house. It cost me my girlfriends. It cost me my jobs. It didn't matter. I was willing to continue to pay that price, no matter what it took, just to stay so numbed out or so high that I didn't have to experience everything that was going on around me. Now, during this period, I began working the oil field at 18. And there weren't a lot of safety rules back then. I'm 55 now. And so I broke out in 1981. I was a good hand. I worked 7 days. I was off 7 days. I'd work 14 days or I'd be off 7 days. So I managed to keep everything in control to where I always had a job. I always had income. And that was never an issue. Later in life, it did, because it got to where I couldn't pass a urine test in order to keep a job. So I would have to do other measures in order to pass a urine test. So eventually, after hitting bottom after bottom and getting help after help, and I didn't even mention the psychiatric wards, just first time he stuck me in one of those. Why? I don't know, instead of drug rehab. But so I'd go into them, and some of them people were fruity. They kicked me out, actually. They said, "You don't even need to be here. Man, your problem isn't you're crazy. Your problem is drugs." And I actually sat there and taught class to a whole group of new interns for a whole day on the use of crack cocaine. And, I say some of this stuff real light, but it wasn't light. This wasn't lighthearted stuff. I look back on it, and yeah, I have to laugh sometimes to keep from crying. But God had a plan for my life. And from the time I was a young boy, God spoke to me. I remember at 17 years old that my friend's brother was in a wheelchair. And I had came up in a certain denomination and all this, and we was all out drinking, and his brother was at home, and I had to jump on my motorcycle and run to town for something. And when I got over to my friend's house, I come outside, and I remember thinking about that young man in the wheelchair, and I looked up to heaven, and I took a beer, and I threw it as high as I could, and I cussed God. I said, "You ain't no God, because if you were, you wouldn't have let this happen to him." I had no concept that we lived in a fallen world. I had no idea that the enemy was prince and power of this world until years later in life, as I began to indulge into the Word. From that moment on, and I'm going to skip around a little bit because I want to make a point with this. From that moment on, 10 years went by. I'd lived in Oregon. I'd traveled the U.S. I just escaped Oregon, actually, because I was so strung out up there. And I got home, and the Lord arranged a meeting with somebody one night through an AA meeting, and I wound up at a church with them. And the Lord changed my life within a few weeks. But he didn't change my mind. See, the Bible tells us we have to renew our minds. I was saved, I was set free, and I'll see this over and over through a process in my life. But there were things I was holding on to that I didn't want to let go of. Matter of fact, a few nights later, I had a dream. This was exactly 10 years. I was 17 when I threw the beer bottle. Now I was 27. And that night I had a dream about that young man in that wheelchair. And there were people around me talking all these religious terms. I didn't know what none of them meant. I never had been religious. I just been me. Good time, life of the party. And as I prayed for this young man in the dream, he'd come out of that wheelchair. And when he did, I sat straight up in the bed. And I said, my God, you heard me 10 years ago. And you were this patient to wait on me because you loved me this much. That blew my mind. That someone could love me after all I've done, after all I have said, after as many times as I'd cursed him and wanted nothing to do with him, after I'd tried to get into black magic and every kind of magic you could think of and every kind of demonic worship you could think of, everything to distance myself from this God that let him be in a wheelchair, loved me, forgave me, and accepted me. That's just one instance of the beginning of the miracles that God did in my life. Some of those I'll share, some of them I'll make other tapes for. It wasn't long, and I was crying out on the floor one night in church, just me. I had my own key, and I'm praying in the dark, and I love to pray. And I was praying for the gangs of LA. The movie Colors had just come out, if you're old enough to remember it. You know, the gangs of LA, they never die, they just multiply. And so I'm crying out for people to be sent. And I heard a voice inside of me, or outside, I don't know, it said, you go. Well, I knew right off, that can't be God. I've never been to California, never plan on going to California. So that's not God. But see, God knows everything. And what I didn't know was I would backslide a few months later. And in the process of that backsliding, I would wind up in a rehab program that was Christian-based, that actually had schools after you completed it to where you could go to LA, Florida, several other places. And after I completed that school, I was accepted to that institute in Los Angeles, California, where I lived on the edge of Linwood and Compton. And we ministered to gangs and to youth. And God knew it then. He knew that I'd be going to LA. And so anyway, one night before that took place, I was headed out to the dope house during that backslid period. And I went into a spin. I was doing like 70 miles an hour, you know. And the roads are wet. It had just started raining. Something told me, man, if you hit the brakes, you're about to flip this car. I could see the pine trees coming off in the distance, and I'm kind of like this, you know. And everything's going through my mind just so fast. And I'm thinking, God's mad at you. Man, that's never true. God wasn't mad at me. You know what? A dad disciplines his kid at times. And a dad may get upset, but he loves him. His blood flows through him. And so while I'm spinning, just shoo, shoo, all of a sudden I screamed, Jesus! And from 70 miles an hour, that car came to a dead stop. Boom, that fast. Didn't go off the road. And a voice spoke to me so loud, I don't know if it was thunder to this day. And he said, if I'll do this for you with sin in your life, you think of the power of my name in the hands of a saint that'll use it. And I just broke down and began to weep. First off, I didn't think there were saints. St. Peter, St. Paul, yeah. But I didn't know the Bible calls us all saints. Read 1 Corinthians. It opens up to the saints at Corinth. We are saints because he has sanctified us through his blood. And I sat there that night and I was holding the wheel and I was just crying. And I said, I'm not ready, God. And I went right on to the dope house. That's how lost I was. And through many years, I would have my ups and I would have my downs. I would try to get it together. I never stopped trying to get it together. Sometimes, I remember 8 years in a row during the Super Bowl, I was in some type of rehab. Because your bottoms get closer and closer. If you're an addicted person and you've hit your bottom before, guess what? It's not going to take near as long the next time. And the next time's shorter. I remember it got down to 2 months when I hit my bottom. So, and I'm going to skip around. We're going to go to 2004. I'd been in the oil field. I had been promoted. I was about to be promoted again. We drove up to work that day. For 5 years, I'd had a bad back. The doctors had me on more pain medication and things than you can imagine. And of course, me being the one that has always IV'd, I continued. And I drove up to work one morning. I ran out of medicine. I was going through bad withdrawals. I did a whole bunch of methamphetamine that night in order to try to maintain. And when I got to work that next day, I looked around and I said, God, I don't want to live no more. My whole life flashed in front of me as a kid at the creek with the guys building a dam, going fishing, playing baseball. There was no more good times for me. My life was over. I just looked and I said, I quit. I'm going home. I was about to be promoted. My wife thought I was crazy. She was going to leave me. I don't blame her. She was a good woman. She still is a good woman, and she's still with me. But we walked through some hard times, and she was going to leave. And I said, you do what you got to do. I said, but I don't want to live like this no more. Either God heal me or God kill me. And what I didn't understand, at that moment, I was willing to lay down my life. I was willing to lose my life in order to gain His. See, I knew without insurance, my medicine was $1,500 a month. I knew I couldn't have it no more because I wouldn't be able to buy it. I knew I didn't care about the job anymore, or the house, or the cars, or any of that. With a 3-year-old baby at home, which I couldn't even hardly pick up and carry because of my back during that situation. But I just wanted to die. So that was on a Friday. We drove in, me and another guy. Sunday we went to church. And you know how church can be. You got people that talk about everybody in every church. Just get over it and get past it, okay? I'd rather go to church with them than go to hell with them. And you've got good people in church, people that really love the Lord, that really trust the Lord, that really from their heart want to give it all to God. And we just have to understand this. It's human nature, and it's the God nature that brings the love out in them. If they're going in the flesh, then they're going to be fleshly. And there's carnal Christians. Read 1 Corinthians. But long story short, that morning I went into the men's group. Before church we'd have, I guess you would call it your Bible study or your class, just like the kids have, and everybody's eating donuts and they're drinking coffee and they're having a good time. And I'm tired of putting a face on. I'm tired of wearing a mask. I wanted just to let them, just to be who I was and to feel what I was feeling and to hurt the way I was hurting and just to let it out. And yet you had to put on a mask and try to be somebody you wasn't. And so I sat out at that table all by myself, and I'm going to be spiritual. I'm going to open my Bible. I'm going to start reading my Bible. And I opened that Bible, and it fell open to Ezekiel chapter 37. And it said, the Lord asked Ezekiel, says, Son of man, can these bones live? And I'm paraphrasing. He says, well, Lord. He said, I want you to prophesy to the bones. And he prophesied to him, and all the bones came together and made a loud noise and rattle. Things were being shaken. But even after things were shaken and the bones came back, and he prophesied and the flesh came upon them and all that, they were still dead men. There was no life in them. And I had listened to church, and I had been to the altars and laid my pipes and every syringe. I've laid everything on the altar right there in church in front of hundreds of people, because I just wanted to try my best to do the right thing. But I didn't know that I cannot do the right thing. It takes His Spirit in me. And so that morning, I sat there and I read that. And then it said, prophesy to the winds. And when he did, the breath of God, the breath entered into them, and they stood up as an army. And I read that, and I sat there and I said, well, God, can't you do that to me? Do you love me as much as you love them? Why can't you do that for me? And of course, class started and the bell rang and class was over, and I got out of there just as quick as I can. And I'm trying to get used to this new thing because I haven't done a lot of recording. So if I'm looking at me actually instead of looking up at the camera, which would be right there. So forgive me for that. We got in big church that morning. And when we go, we sit 3 pews back. Now you got to understand, I had degenerative spine disease, L2 and S1. I had pinched nerves in my neck where the holes had closed up on the nerves that are in your neck. And so I always had neck problems. I had a hip that gave me constant problems and a knee that I had to wear a brace on for about the last 8 years at that point. So I had a lot going on, and here I am still on drilling rigs with sledgehammers, and I wore myself out, you know. I loved doing what I did, and I just continued to do it until I just couldn't without the help of medication. And then I medicated. So while I'm sitting there, church hasn't even started. And this lady walks up behind me. I didn't know who it was. And she takes her hand and she touches me on the back. God said you made the right decision. Your healing's now. And when she did, ice literally shot down from my neck, through my back, down to my L2. And I'm just sitting there like, ooh, and I'm freezing. I'm having this fusion take place in my back. There's no other word over the years that I could think of except being fused together. Well, while this is going on, people are coming in, people are greeting each other. And so I'm sitting there, and what I would normally do is I'd stretch my legs out under the pew and make them, that way I didn't have to keep my knee bent up and my hip and all that. And I looked down. I wore white tennis shoes most of my life. I love them. And I noticed my foot was off the floor. And I'm thinking, man, I'm not holding my foot off the floor. And I could see the tennis shoe all of a sudden, and I seen fingerprints in my tennis shoe. And then all of a sudden, a pull, and I heard a pop in my hip. And I just began to weep. I just lost it. Church hasn't even started. And I don't know if it had to be an angel that God had sent. Because I literally could see the indentions. And at that moment, I got ice cold. I got so cold, you would think he was in North Dakota, and I worked there 2 years, so I know. And I asked my wife, I looked over and said, Steph, are you cold? She said, no, why? I said, touch my arm. And she touched my arm, and she said, my God. Now, this way we talk in the South, she said, you ought to be in a meat locker. Now, I don't know if y'all know what that is, but where you hang meat and it stays cold. But anyway, point being, I'm sitting there now, and I'm thinking, what is going on? And I said to myself or to God, I said, what are you doing? And I'm saying this in my mind, God, what's happening? And I heard him clear as day. He said, I'm giving you a blood transfusion right now. And I looked at my jeans, and when I did, if you've ever seen them commercials on TV, like we're interstate and all of a sudden the cars are going at the speed of light and you just see the white lights, I could see blue lights shooting through my body. I mean, totally lost it. So church is about to start. I go up there and tell the pastor what's taking place. And of course, everybody gives him praise. Yeah. Well, they just don't know how serious this was. They had me on 350, but I was doing up to 900 milligrams of Obits a day. Yeah. I was 165 pounds. And I was doing twice as much at a time as any normal human could do. And I was doing it the way I talked about earlier. And at that point in my life, I could sleep 3 hours a night propped up on pillows. If I took a bunch of the medication they gave me that was for the Soma instead of the other opiates and stuff. And that night I went home and I slept 12 hours. I jumped up. I felt like a 20-year-old. There was no arthritis in my body. There was no more pain. I mean, I was delivered. It blowed my mind. Well, I knew this. I didn't have a job. Here's my thinking now. I have not renewed my mind. God has healed me. God has saved me. God has set me free. When I got saved and set free, the cussing left. The healing was there. The deliverance. He left me nicotine. I had to deal. He's going to leave you something to deal with. You're going to have to deal with some things, and it doesn't happen right off. It may come down the line. You know, where much is given, much is required. He deals with everybody individually. So what's wrong for me may not be wrong for you. I'm not judging you for anything. So if I judged anybody, it would be me, because I'm hard on me. So at that point of my life, my mind hasn't been renewed, and I'm thinking, still thinking, well, I got one doctor's appointment left because my insurance don't expire for 20 days. I got one more refill. I've got a circle of companions that all use the same medication. So I'm safe there. And this is how I could pay my bills the next month. And I decided somehow in the next couple of days that, what's one going to hurt? What do they tell you at AA? One's too many, 1,000's not enough. You know, a 12-step program, and I'm all for it. Works for some people. I've tried everything. I am a one step. Jesus steps in, and boom, he does the work. Well, there's still issues that need to be dealt with. Yeah. Do I still need to do a 4th step and talk to people? Yeah. And let things out? Yeah. So all that does come into play. I can show you 7 steps just in the son that left home and came back home, the prodigal. But point being, I decided to use just once. And when I did, I was praying, oh God, don't let this kill me, don't let this kill me, don't let it kill me. Boom, it was over. And I was like, man, and I'm there. Again, I'm high. So I decided about 2 hours later, I'm going to do one more. Just one more. So I go to do one more, and while I'm fixing it up, I hear a voice, plain as day, and he says, behold, your God. And I thought, this ain't my God. But was it? Did I leave my wife in the hospital pregnant, going through things, and I'm out looking for drugs? Did I spend every moment of my life trying to get it if I was out? While I was home, did I run to the doctors every month and make sure I had everything I needed? Did I count my pills? Did I ration myself when needed? Yeah, it was my God. And that next morning when I woke up, and understand me here, there's many people that God will heal. Even a sinner. God will heal a sinner quicker than a saint. And a lot of times your healing is just instantaneous. You have no more issues ever. But there's some he's called to walk in your healing, or to walk in relationship with him that keeps the healing activated. You see, the closer I am to him, or the closer you are to your wife or husband, the more you know them, the more they rub off on you, the more the character is on you. You know? So the same way with the Lord, he had called me to walk close to him. And that next morning I woke up, and when I got out of bed, my back, it caught right off the bat. And so I wound up backsliding again. That took me 40 days for that to happen. And when it did, it happened. My wife finally decided that she was going to lead me. One time I woke up on an ambulance stretcher. They're carrying me out of the house. I'm passed out from the Xanax the doctors were giving me, trying to come off the other stuff that had me all wired up. And, then they put me on the methadone, you name it. And I'm just being open here. Most people would cut a lot of this. I won't tell you how it is. That's the worst stuff you could ever be on in your life. Don't let a doctor start giving you that kind of stuff, because you will be on it if you're not careful the rest of your life, or it will kill you. I have friends, I have preached their funeral. I'm an ordained minister, and I have preached their funeral behind methadone and Xanax, So anyway, as things progressed, she decided to leave. And at that point, my little girl's in the back seat. My wife's got her all shook up. She's 3 years old. And anyway, the windows rolled up, and as they pull away, I see my reflection in the windshield. And what I saw was my father one night when he was walking to the car drunk, and they were trying to protect me. And I realized at that moment I had become everything that I didn't want to become. I lifted the phone and I called a good friend that has a recovery program. And I said, I need to come down there, man. I said, I told him everything that's happened. And I said, I have been praying, and I could still hear the Lord on certain things. And he had told me what program to go to after I go there to detox. And he said, okay. He said, well, whenever you're ready, I'll come get you. And he got me just in the nick of time, probably about 3-4 days later. And he took me back to his state, and I figured 10 days, detox. And I didn't realize that methadone is so bad that it messes with your brain sensors, so you don't know when to go to sleep and when to wake up unless you got something telling you to go to sleep. So for 14 straight days and nights, I had no sleep. And it's not like that methamphetamine where you're freaking out and doing all that crazy. No, you're just normal, but you're drained. I've never seen a worse drug in my life than what they advertise on TV to get off opiates and to come to the methadone clinic. Do not do it. And so he had told me, I figured 10 days, he told me it was going to take 60, that's what the Lord had spoke to him. In 5 weeks, I was like this, and I could barely walk across the floor. In 2 months, in 60 days, I was ready to move on to the next step. The next step was I wanted to go to this place the Lord had told me, and I went there to get my mind renewed. It wasn't about the drugs anymore. It was about renewing my mind. It was about getting on my face and crying out to God for help on something that I can't do. See, as long as you think you can do it, long as you can control it, long as you are strong enough or man enough or whatever, and you've got enough power, you're never going to beat it. How many New Year's resolutions have you kept? 2 weeks? Because it's all about your will. Your will is so strong, and your will has been trained since your youth, and that's a whole nother story we can go into later, that you're going to follow your will, and you think that you're trying to do the opposite, but your will won't allow you to. Your mind, well, your body, your soul, and your spirit. And your soul's made up of your mind, will, and emotions. Some people have been so emotionally crushed and had so many different people in their lives take a piece of them with them. And it gets really deep when you get into the soul. So now you've got this thing to where you think you can be bigger than. And I praise God for the few that I've met over the years that just put it down, or they can throw their cigarette down and never go back. Hey, more power to you, you know. Church didn't work for me. AA didn't work. NA didn't work. What worked was a relationship with Jesus Christ. And how that happened, I was sitting in a room and a man was telling me, I was so religious and so dogmatic over the years. I had a certain belief system that it had to be this way or there's no way, just like all the religions do. Well, you got to do this, you got to do that. You can't do this, you can't do that. Well, guess what? I can do anything I want. Even Martin Luther said, who started the Protestant movement, he had a student come to him and say, you telling me I can do whatever I want to do? He said, yeah, I am. Now here's the true question. What do you want to do? Because that's going to tell me where you're at. You know, Christ works in you, and then you work it out. So whatever you believe affects your responses and how you do things. Oh, everybody can say, oh, well, I believe in Jesus and go live like hell. Well, if we really believed it, we probably wouldn't live that way, because we would live out our belief system. And that's what you do. Who gave you your belief system? Your mother and father, your school, your nation, your culture. If we can change the belief systems, or if they can change your belief systems, they can change everything about you. What are they doing with textbooks nowadays? Let's don't even go there, because I don't want to get started on all that. Here's the thing. God had to break down my belief system. And he sent a young preacher that preached grace. And I told him one day, I said, you're telling me I can live like hell and I can go to heaven. He said, son, I'm telling you, when you get this, you don't want to live like hell. That's when I shut my mouth. I began to listen to him, and things began to transform in my life. I listened to a tape one day he brought called Embracing the Father's Love. And Jack Frost, you can find him on the internet, he's passed on now, but this was his testimony I listened to. And all the things he tried to do to win his Father's love, and all the things he tried to accomplish to be that man, to be the one that could just hit the ball and be the praise of the crowd. And before it was over, I realized everything he had done, even though it was different, he was a fisherman and I was something else, and he was telling my story. And there were 60 guys in this room, and I just ran out back. And I just began to weep. And when I did, it was like 20 pounds come off my shoulders. And it was that night that God set me totally free. It was that night. I'm looking at 2005. May 2005 was when I got sober. And that's a true miracle, because I was never able to go over a year. Most of the time I didn't do that. But since then, I've been clean. And the true miracle is, there's times in our life we still go into these struggles. And I fall out of love, it seems like, and you find yourself, the enemy trying to beat you up, and you're not where you was anymore. And how do you get back? Well, we know how to get back. If you've ever been there, you know what it takes. Just loving on him. As I begin to worship and love on him and believe in faith, all of a sudden it activates his grace. And his grace is what empowers me to walk through the situation. And look, I can get in the flesh quick. And I have to be caught from my wife and told, whoa, you better watch what you're doing, boy. Because it wouldn't take much for me to go off on something. Anger's an issue with me I have today. He saved my marriage. It hadn't been perfect. I could do a whole nother series just on marriage and the things you're going to face. But you know what? I believe that God made your wife to complete you. They became one flesh. And that's where me and my wife is striving to get to today. I'm having to work away from home and be away from my family. And, you know, people say, well, that's not God's will. Well, you know, there's a lot of things that we don't understand that may not be God's will or that is God's will, and we can't comprehend it. I was out of church for 2 solid years, working every Sunday, every Saturday, 7 days a week. And they said, well, that's not God's will. You know, all the church people, God wants you in church. Well, I decided to take a vacation, and I was going back over to my friends for a week to visit with him, where in 2005, left there, you know. And I was going to a revival. And I made it 70 miles down the road, and the Lord spoke to me. He said, I can't even keep you out of church 2 years. How can I send you into a communist nation to minister? Man, I pulled the car over on the side of the road and just began to weep. There was no doubt. The presence of God was so thick in that car. Look, I've experienced the light side. I've experienced the dark side. And you cannot be neutral. There is no neutral. If you're not for him, you're against him. So that means that you are actually working on the enemy side and may not even know it. I'm going to do another tape on miracles, just some God stories that happened in my life, different things, demonic things that I have seen manifest, even in me. I had to be delivered when my whole body was coming off the floor at one point in my life. But what I wanted to tell you was God totally healed me that day. Now, after that, my mind still has to be renewed. But God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I never tell this story the same, and I haven't told it in a while, but when I'm in front of a group of people, I did a lot of prison ministry. I did a lot of faith-based rehab ministry. I did a lot of street ministry. That's where my heart is. Church, I can be kind of rough on them at church. But I love to do a church every once in a while. But the thing is, we have got to come to a place to where we are willing to let our thinking be challenged and our belief systems be changed and ask God to come in and say, okay, God, show me the truth. I pray you show me the truth. And just allow him to, over a period of time, whether it's in the Word, the Bible, whether it's through people, or all of a sudden he opens up something brand new to you. And you know what? What I believed when I was young, a lot of it was half-truths or truth to it, or there was truth in it. If you read Genesis chapter 3, even what the serpent said had some truth in it, but it was twisted. So today I'm asking you, do you need to be healed? Do you want to be healed? Have you hit that bottom with alcohol and drugs? What about the person I see right now that's just isolating, that you don't feel worthy, that you feel less than? You're not. He loves you more than he loves anything in the world. He loves us all, just like Billy Graham or any of them, or Paul or Peter. That's just it. We have to learn to see who we are in him once we become his. But we have to first truly become his. I don't know if I've been effective with this today or not. But he brought me through the addictions of every type of drug you can think of. He healed my body. He set my mind free over and over from addictions to lust and perversion. Because I have a woman every day, sometimes 4 different women a night. This was before I was married. My wife is the only woman, Jesus is my witness, that I have never cheated on. And we've been together 20 years now. So I'm going to cut this off right here. And we're going to start another part. And I'm not sure exactly on what. I wanted to give you just a brief overview from childhood through addiction to redemption, that you would know there is hope for someone like me that went through, 15, 16 rehabs. I lose track. I could probably sit there and put them on paper. But there's hope. And I want to pray for you right now, if you allow me to. Father, I just pray that whoever's out there that may take time to listen to this, and Lord, you know whose ears to put it in front of, Lord, that you would do the work in their life that they need, whether it be healing, whether it be deliverance, Father God, whether, Lord, they just need to begin to come out of isolation and begin to mix with people that could put joy and hope back in their life. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, I pray for wholeness, Lord. You said to the blind man, would you be whole? And that has more to do with or the man by the fountain that day. That has more to do with just health. Would you be whole in your mind, in your body, in your soul? Father, I just pray right now that the anointing would just flow through this camera. And Lord, wherever place they're at, whether they're in that young kid stage still because of what's happened in their youth, or somebody has abused them, Lord, that you would just begin to minister to them in that area. In the name of Jesus. And I want to walk you through this right now. If you've never asked God into your heart, we don't know if we got tomorrow. The Bible says, if you confess with your mouth and you believe in your heart, then you'll be saved. And I think there's a little more to it, because we have to truly, truly believe. But if I confess that Jesus Christ is Lord of my life, Lord God, I ask you to come into my life and be the Lord of my life. Forgive me of my sins. And I believe that you died for me on a cross and that you rose again on the third day that I might have life. If we can honestly and truly pray that prayer and say, come God, restore me, forgive me, and teach me. Let me be open-minded and open-hearted. Turn my ears inside out that I would hear you. Show me in your word. Then the God of heaven and earth is about to show up at your house. And he's about to begin to teach you. And I release that in the name of Jesus Christ. All right, guys, we're going to stop right there. I'll get back with you. Thanks for listening.